Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
Shelter, and Easton stirred up some serious opposition from local residents who feared what kind of impact it would have on their neighborhood. But the Easton Board of Zoning Appeals approved the project. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. The vote on the location at 107 Goldsboro Street was good news for the Talbot Interfaith Shelter. And back in early May, a crowded meeting in the town office building saw a number of opponents express their fears about the impact of turning the bed and breakfast owned by Carla Howell into a homeless shelter. Some feared their property values would go down. Others saw the potential for danger from such a facility, and it might not fit into the neighborhood, they said. Well, joining us in our studios this morning are Jack Carroll, president of the Talbot Interfaith Shelter, and its executive director, Julie Lowe, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Don.
Well, let me first of all ask you, were you surprised at the opposition that you got, the crowded room there in the building? What did you think?
I wasn't surprised that there was opposition. I was somewhat surprised by the intensity of the opposition and the, as you said in your introductory remarks, the fear and anger, the emotional content of the opposition was somewhat of a surprise to me.
Julie?
I agree. I think they were pretty organized. They were represented by an attorney who had done a lot of work in various towns in the area, and they were intent on closing us down.
So how did this search get underway, and how did you finally decide on the spot in Goldsboro?
Well, we've been working in churches for the last 6 years in a rotating cold weather shelter from December to the springtime. And our objective has always been to move into a year-round long-term shelter. And we've been looking both for long-term goals to build something eventually, but more for an interim goal to expand to the year-round shelter as soon as we can. And we've, for the last 2 years, been looking for both rental and for sale property, and we came upon Easton's Promise, the bed and breakfast, which, from our point of view, is ideal for what we want.
So what was attractive about it? What stood out as opposed to any of the other locations?
Well, we're looking to expand to handle 12 to 15 people, including parents and young children. This is not only within walking distance of all the services within Easton, but the building itself, as you mentioned, was a bed and breakfast, so it's outfitted with 6 bedrooms, each with bath and showers. Air conditioning. It has a sprinkler system, which is a major issue in Talbot County because the reason we're restricted to 5 people is that's all you can host without a sprinkler system. And so this has already got a wet sprinkler system installed. Has a very large kitchen, very large common areas. If we had to design a facility for the spaces we needed, it exactly fits our needs.
One of the people who apparently spoke out against this was Bob Shanahan. He's, I guess, with Shoreline Realty. Actually invited him on the program, but he declined. But one of the things he said, I guess he argued, he talked about that if a homeless shelter is put in an unstable area with depressed real estate values, it helps stabilize the area. If put in a stabilized area with extensive properties, it makes it less stable and those values decline. What about that argument?
These are assertions where there's limited evidence. There are a number of studies on the impact of homeless shelters and service, generally transition housing of various kinds in various neighborhoods. There is very limited data on the number of times that these types of facilities have been placed in high value, high income levels, and that's partially because high value, high income levels have been more successful in preventing these from being there to start with. So the data sets are small. In the studies I've read, in most cases, regardless of income, and in my own experience in Washington, D.C., where I was involved in a couple of these elements, the impact has been negligible. There are so many other things that affect the housing market that a service-oriented transition housing is a minor impact.
Well, so what kind of neighborhood are we looking at here?
This is zoned commercial, and there are several single-family homes, multifamily homes, several businesses on this block. It's a very diverse neighborhood, and that was one of the points brought up at the Board of Zoning Appeals deliberation, was that this is not a special residential community. It's very diverse. It has many houses from, very well kept to not so well kept at all.
So, so what other kinds of buildings then are around? I mean, are there some residential homes, or is there some shops, or what's
in the
that
block
like?
that we're at the edge of, as Julie says, the commercial residential zone. So the block that we're on, across the street is a bank, a parking lot, and Bob Shanahan's real estate firm. So across the street on that block is all commercial. On the side of the street that we're on, we're the second out of 4 houses. The first house is a rental, multiple family. Our home, which is currently a bed and breakfast, a home that's been split into apartments, and a single family residential. So it's just that one block is a fairly mixed bag. But I think the message that we heard loud and clear is that the neighborhood is interested and very dedicated to improving. It's part of the historic district. They're proud of the neighborhood. They want it to look good, and we very much want to be part of that. Our objective is to ensure that we not only maintain what the property looks like, but looks better, that we're a positive addition to the neighborhood, not a negative one.
One final thing about this, there was a suggestion that perhaps instead of being where it's located, that they might have been better located, say, some kind of warehouse. And the argument was put forward that it would be cheaper per bed, more ample space for parking, large bathrooms, areas to play for kids, and so on. What about that suggestion, and why this as opposed to, say, something like that?
I think what people don't understand about our program is that one of our main goals is to try and reincorporate people who have fallen on hard times into a neighborhood, to reincorporate them into a community that can support them, that can help them grow and become a contributing part of that community. If we're stuck out in a warehouse next to a field somewhere, that's not going to happen. And these are people, just like you and me, who have had maybe a cycle of challenges that they just can't overcome, and they just need a little respite time, a little help to get back on their feet, and this is an ideal location to do that. Plus, any of those warehouses would cost a significant amount of money to renovate to make fit our program and turn, warehouse into bedrooms, etc. And Easton's Promise actually needs absolutely no renovations, no changes inside or outside to accommodate our programs.
Well, just adding to that, we probably see us both bristle a little bit when you start saying warehousing the homeless. The objective is not to isolate people who have had hard times and hard luck, but to integrate them into the community and make them into productive citizens. And we've been very, very fortunate and very successful in even the limited amount of social connection, social services we've been able to provide with our seasonal cold weather shelter, just hooking people up with job opportunities, with social service opportunities, mental health opportunities, making sure that they can access the benefits that they're due. It's far easier to slip through the safety net than it is to climb back out, and we're there to assist people to do that. And removing them from the community, putting them in a warehouse where you can't see them and can't care for them is not the solution.
But one of the things that the board said that it felt was important to it was that there would be no real indication that this was a place for homeless folks. There would be no signage, no outside indication. I mean, and assuming to impact the local property values and how people feel. It's almost as if on one hand you want to putting people into this diverse neighborhood. On the other hand, you're hiding the fact, as it were, that they're homeless.
Not hiding the fact that
yeah.
They are our guests. We treat our clients as our guests. We call them our guests. We're providing service. They will come and go during the day as the tourists who stayed at the B&B came and went when it was used as a B&B. It should be pretty transparent, unless you knew that the people that were staying at that house were having their room and board paid for. I mean, basically, if you looked at our homeless population and you looked at the volunteers who are caring for the homeless, and you sit down with the evening meals, and you had to pick who were the volunteers and who were the homeless, you wouldn't. I mean, there's no big labels. I mean, these are people that look and act just like you and me, and have had maybe no more bad decisions than you and I have had. Their outcomes have been worse. So, I think some of the stereotyping and some of the fear, hopefully, as we go through this process, we're able to at least correct some of the perceptions. We can disagree on the facts, but the perceptions are difficult to deal with if they're totally erroneous.
Now, one of the attractions, I think, to the board is we indicated that this is not somebody that's coming in from the outside putting this together, but that you've been in the community for a long time, that you've been handling the issue of the homelessness, particularly during the winter months. What's been your experience in laying down that track record for the folks there in Talbot?
Well, we've been doing this for 6 years in Easton, in the historic district, exactly the same areas where we're proposing this bed and breakfast homeless shelter and transitional home. We have proven that we are very safety conscious, and that we have over 500 volunteers who give their time and talents to us each winter. We have never had to call the police or had an incident where there was any negative response. We're very cognizant of the fact that we're in churches and we want to protect the property, and people treat, both our guests and our volunteers treat those properties with respect, and we know that that's going to be same case at Easton's Promise.
One of the things that struck me as I was sort of looking at this story, I ran across a statistic which said that Easton ranked, or I guess it's sixth, Easton or Talbot, I guess Talbot County, ranks sixth in the lineup of American cities with the highest concentration of billionaires.
Yes.
I mean, and yet, how serious is the homelessness situation? I mean, are we looking at people who are very, very wealthy, and then there's, like, obviously some people who are just not doing well at all? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, I think the Talbot County has a higher concentration of the very wealthy than probably the counties further than Dorchester, Somerset, further down on the shore. But the working population looks pretty much like it does in the other counties. It has the same poverty problems, and it's the people we see. The waterman who is out of a job, the building construction person who's out of a job, the family who's gone through a tough divorce. These are the people we see there. So there is a very wealthy layer in Talbot County, but if you take the average income is not an indicator of the level of poverty that exists.
Most of the wealthy folks have moved here from other areas. They have second homes. They've found that Talbot County is a beautiful spot to live. But the people we run into in the homeless shelter are folks who have lived here for years and years and years and just don't have the support system that some of the other folks do.
Is this a county, and maybe a town of Easton, but a county where the very, very wealthy and those are very, very poor, or those people at home, they live almost virtually in the same universe, or do they separate out? Are those people who are wealthy, as we've indicated, are they aware that this is a problem here? Do they see it?
Some are, some aren't. This whole process is being made possible by a very large donation from an anonymous donor. We have people that provide extensive financial support. Some of our volunteers who come and cook meals themselves very well off people who care about the community. As Julie says, there are others who are not really integrated into the community, but it's people living very close to each other. They may not be aware of each other.
So where did the opposition, do you think, to this being placed there come from?
Well, even the opposition has been very supportive of Talbot Interfaith Shelter and the services we provide. And they have said pretty much to a person, if you had this someplace else, we would support you, we would volunteer, we would donate money, but we just don't think this is the appropriate location. I unfortunately think that any neighborhood is going to have that same feeling wherever we try to put the homeless shelter and transitional home. I just feel compelled to make ourselves be good neighbors in this community and hopefully reach out to the neighbors who are in fear and have trepidations about their property value. I understand all that. And we hope to mend those fences and be good neighbors and actually contribute to that neighborhood and make it a better place to live.
And I think what we have to do where the fears and concerns are based upon erroneous perceptions, things that aren't true, we clearly have a dialogue and educational process where there are legitimate concerns, and there were legitimate concerns expressed on traffic and parking and screening, and we have to make sure that we're meeting our own standards, and our standards meet the needs of the neighborhood. So we are hearing and we are listening. We are going to try to respond to the neighborhood concerns.
Was this just simply, do you think, just a not in my backyard syndrome?
There is that component. And the people who say those words, I don't think this is the right place, don't want to be called NIMBYs. Mm-hmm. But there is certainly that component. Anywhere you would put a facility such as ours, there are going to be fears and perceptions that are maybe not based in fact. We see visions on the television of homelessness in cities, and that makes us fearful. The fact is that is not the case in Talbot County and the Midshore. It's a totally different picture. And these folks are folks who actually work for some of those billionaires and millionaires, cleaning their houses, doing work on their landscape, and it just, they do cohabitate, but they don't really travel in the same circles. So it's hard for people to perceive the other side's views.
I was going to say, so what kind of folks do you find have become homeless in Talbot County? And how do they contrast with what we think of? I mean, are we seeing more women and men? Are we seeing more families? Obviously, we've been hit with the Great Recession, which certainly has produced a tremendous amount of homelessness as well as just sort of hardship in general. Give us a kind of sense about who these folks are.
Well, we can take turns on this one.
You go
we all have a basic story. And one of the actual strengths of our program, as Julie says, we have 500 volunteers. And to the person, the feedback I get as the host site coordinator for our church is that the experience of volunteering and actually talking to and getting to know and spending a few hours changed their view of what homelessness was. One young woman came and served a dinner in our church and was surprised to see that one of the homeless people was the father of a schoolmate of her daughter, who she had been standing for the last year in line at the school for the walkers. And this was somebody she knew. And she didn't know that he had lost his job, gone through a divorce, foreclosure on his home, and all the things he assumed would keep him from homelessness fell through in a very short order, and there he was. Well, he's one of the success stories. By the end of the winter season, he had another job, had an apartment, had moved on. But were we not there to be the temporary support during that transition, that descent could have continued, and who knows? And there's stories like that. I've met people that were nephews of people that I know in the community, and they've just kind of run out the string of as Julie says, of couch surfing. There's no more couches left in their family, and now they're back out. Or healthcare problems. One woman had a spouse and two brothers die in the same 3-month period. Medical issues, lost a job. So it's a sequence. The typical picture is a sequence of uncontrollable events that have catastrophic impacts, and the person has no place to go. And we want to be not only the place to go, but also the place that will turn that trajectory around.
One of the gentlemen Jack was just speaking of said to many people that the Talbot Interfaith Shelter wasn't just a bed and a meal, but a support group that helped him work through his issues. He was very depressed. He was very stressed out, and the fact that volunteers would sit with him after dinner and just talk him through some things and give him ideas of places to try and go and get help made a world of difference and just changed his whole attitude around so that he could get back on his feet, get his own apartment, get a job, and become successful.
Do these people, particularly the people who thought they were on the right track, and as the first example that you gave, they find themselves shocked, surprised that this has happened to them?
Absolutely. I mean, part of the common denominator I think that I've seen in times of the shelter is that deer in the headlights look. How did this all happen? And each of the stories is different.
Right.
But each of them is a sequence of negative events. Some their own fault. They may have been a bad choice, or some that weren't their fault. It could be their company folded.
Their landlord foreclosed. Their uncle sold their boat, and so he has no. The waterman's job that he counted on wasn't there, and all of a sudden, there are people in this economy living closer to the line than we think, and probably than they think. And it doesn't take too much to push them over the line. The question is, once you have nothing, is there a place that can help you rebound? And that's what we want to be.
Have you seen a change over the last, say, 5 or 6 years in the kinds of people that are coming to homeless shelters, given the kind of economic dislocation? I know I've talked to some other homeless shelters, and they've said they've for instance, they saw, say, a greater number of families, for example, or
Yes.
there might be a greater number of women, for example. I mean, what are you seeing, Julie?
We've absolutely seen more families, and right now in Talbot County there is really no resource for a whole family where that they can stay and get help.
Why is that?
I think it's probably because it's a new, more of a new situation. It's hard to find funds to help people, and we're running into all the naysayers that don't like homeless shelters. There are several battered women shelters in more specific types of places, but for just a woman with 4 children or a family intact that has lost their support system, there is really no place for them to stay. So that is what we hope to provide with Easton's Promise.
Is there, one of the questions I had, particularly when I first came here about 10 years ago, because there was great discussion about the homeless, there were 1 or 2 people who actually died during the winter, was the role of government. And I was surprised that government was not doing more. What kind of role is the government playing in Talbot County, and what kind of role should it play?
We receive no government funds. We're
Right.
Strictly a volunteer, privately funded operation. I would say government involvement, and Julie chime in on this, is minimal compared to having come from Northern Virginia, Washington area, working with the homeless in that aspect. We're a lot of volunteer organizations, but an awful lot of government support also. But part of the attraction of the area is low tax rates. Low tax rates mean low services, and part of the services that are not funded are human services. So and I think one of the things that I would say is you can't have it both ways. You can't say we're not going to pay taxes, let the volunteer organizations pick up the load, and then not let the volunteer organizations pick up the load. You can't have it both ways.
Julie, what do you think about the government role?
Well, I think we all realize that government funds are drying up. We have a great country in, economic distress, and it's hard to find government funds. And when you do find them, it's very rigorous reporting. And I know for a fact that our county and our town support us greatly, but they have no funds to give.
Has there been any leadership taken on the part of government leaders in the county or the cities? I mean, have they, or have you guys sort of basically done it on your own?
We've done it on our own. I've seen a little more government involvement in Queen Anne's County with their homeless shelter. But for the moment, we've done it on our own. We would love to reach out to some of the government folks, the town council and the county council, and hope to have them engaged as we go forward. This is all, we have big plans, and there's an awful lot of work to do, and that's one of the things on the list.
Now, currently, you operate something like 8 shelter sites, particularly during the winter months. What are you doing for the particular that time of year that gets cold? With the involvement of the churches and so on?
Well, right now, we work with the Housing Commission of Talbot to provide apartments for families. We have 2 apartments right now. We're talking about adding a third. This is something that can get expensive, and this is another reason for purchasing Easton's Promise, so that we can put those families in our location where all the services are together. We can bring the community service agencies together to the table at that location to help each and every person in there with all their diverse needs get what they need to get back on their feet.
So as you look at this project, you've got this homeless shelter. How quickly are things going to get moving? And you've now got the approval from the zoning appeals board. What happens next? What's the timeline here?
Well, I wish I could give you a precise timeline. That we're discussing that in the car on the way down. We have the permit. The permit can be and probably will be appealed to the circuit court. The people who have standing, who are people that have testified as I understand it, in the Board of Zoning Appeals hearing, have 30 days to make an appeal. We don't know. We suspect an appeal will be made, but we don't know that. We are not going to close on the purchase of the house until we have a permit that's non-appealable. In other words, either appeals have been exhausted or appeals have been denied, because worst case for us would be to own a house that we couldn't use for its purpose. So best case, we would close in the July timeframe and be ready to go this fall, and then it slides from there. And there are several stages and appeals that are at least legally possible, and you'd have to talk to the people who were making appeals to know how determined they were. Now, it is important that the only thing that they can appeal on is the record of the hearing. There is no new evidence or testimony taken, as I understand, in an appeal.
Right.
So it's did the Board of Zoning Appeals follow its own rules and procedures and follow the law?
I mean, is it possible that this thing, if it moves through the courts are notoriously for being slow. I mean, if you just go up the chain, that this could be not just July, but we were talking about months or
possible.
Yeah. And what happens to the homeless while all that happens?
Well, the
you
cost,
got plans, or
I mean, we focus on the cost in our own aspect, but if you do the math, basically the difference between running a cold weather shelter as we did and running a shelter 365 days a year for 15 people as opposed to the 5 people in the homeless is about 4,000 nights a year, 4,000 to 5,000 nights a year where someone is out on the street. So that's the cost. And the cost of delay is that someone who could be in a shelter, could be receiving services, could be turning their life around, is out fending for themselves.
We've been speaking with Jack Harrell. He's the president of the Talbot Interfaith Shelter and its executive director, Julie Lowe, talking about the new shelter that they're hoping to have put together there in Easton, and we appreciate you stopping by and talking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us, Don.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit pac14.org.